I'm VP Engineering here at QuickStart. This is the fourth session on AWS Solution Architect. I myself, as a solution architect, AWS Solution Architect, have implemented the architecture here at QuickStart on AWS Cloud. And also have a bit of experience on the development side and as well as the DevOps. Today's topic, we will be covering the AWS database services, right? There are two different types of databases that you can have it installed /use. I'm using that very loosely on AWS. So the first one would be the installation of a database on your EC2 instance, right? So what this means is that, let's say if you don't want to use AWS's RDS service, which we'll cover in a second, and if you have a database, MySQL database or SQL Server database or any other database that you want to install yourself and have full control over it, you can do that by allocating an EC2 instance for that database service and install on top of that the MySQL database, for example. And we have done that in our organization as well. The benefit of that is basically you have full control of that database. Why? Because that EC2 instance belongs to you. That database that you have installed on it, it belongs to you. You don't have to worry about, the charges, because the charge that you will actually incur is the EC2 instance charges, right? And you can go up a notch on EC2 instance based on the need, or maybe you can go down a notch if you really don't need a heavy machine on EC2 instance, which supports the AWS, which supports MySQL Server. So again, you can bring your own copy of your database and install it on EC2 instance. So the first step would be to pick an EC2 instance based on your need. It could be in the T2 micro tier, or it could be M4 extra large, depending on the need. For example, in our case, we have MS SQL. We are partner with Microsoft as a gold partner. So Amazon does provide AWS its own licenses on when it comes to Microsoft MS SQL Server, right? But that's going to cost a lot of money for us. So what we have done, since we are gold partner with Microsoft, we purchased at a very cheap price from Microsoft the MS SQL Server license, and that license it can be ported to AWS. We had a good box EC2 Instance M4 extra large with a few CPUs and cores on it, and then and good memory. Once we configured that box, then we installed the Microsoft SQL Server license on that box. Big advantage, again, cost effective, right? Because I don't have to incur costs for the Microsoft SQL Server license because I already got it purchased, one-time fee. Then I have copied that license over here and then install it. The only charge would be the EC2 instance, right? So that is something you have to pay regardless, right? And that again can be upped or down based on the need of your services. You can play and tweak with this, saying, okay, what percent of CPU is being used and utilized on that MS SQL Server box EC2 instance, and then you can downgrade to lower memory, for example. Instead of using 16G, you can probably use 8G or something like that, or maybe the database hardware can be configured based on the need for CPUs and whatever you may have. So we are using MS SQL on an EC2 instance, a large M4X large box with the purchase license. You can install MS SQL or whatever you may want to. And again, if you're installing, let's say, MySQL, which is available from outside world, right? That EC2 instance needs to have a net gateway. We talked about just a few seconds ago and also in the previous session. That net gateway would allow you to access the outside world internet, and then maybe download and install the MySQL on your box, right? So that becomes very handy. That net gateway that we talked about earlier allows you to have a route outside to the outside world for installation of that MySQL. Once you're installed, then you can obviously disassociate the net gateway or net instance from that EC2 instance box that you want the MySQL installed on. Then it comes into the RDS, the remote desk database services that Amazon provide. Amazon provide variety of different databases. For example, MariaDB, MySQL, Aurora, MS SQL. Bring your own license if you want to, or Oracle, you can bring your own license as well, right? Maria and MySQL and Aurora, those are pretty known databases, and especially Maria and Aurora, because Amazon has actually fine-tuned those databases and hosted on for performance on their own environment. So we use MariaDB quite a bit here at QuickStart. What it does is basically allows you to not to worry about and feel comfortable from the failover perspective, from load balancing perspective, from even replica read-only perspective, and we will cover that in a few minutes. Then of course, if you have Oracle, I believe it does not have an Oracle RDS readily available, but you have to bring your own license, and then it can be hosted on the AWS environment. NoSQL, there are a few databases that are available within AWS. For example, MongoDB, Cassandra, and then DynamoDB. MongoDB is again and DynamoDB are pretty popular databases when it comes to NoSQL. That's a whole separate discussion when it comes to NoSQL, right? And what are the benefits of NoSQL? If you are familiar with the relational database, with the entity relationship, quickly, I just want to touch base on NoSQL. NoSQL allows you to have a very fluid databases. And if you have worked with the relational databases, you have to define an entity, and then with an entity, you have to define the fields, the type of fields, right? And then once you have defined a table, right, then you can't really modify that easily. You have to, store it, drop the table, recreate it, and make the changes and re-import the data. And then those are the things that you have to kind of do or jump the hoops in order to make sure that you make those changes. You also have to if you want to avoid those changes, you have to make sure you think through forward thinking in terms of what fields I might need in future, what tables I might need in future, and then you start working your design based on that using your ER model. In the NoSQL database, you don't really have to do a lot of forward thinking, right? So, and it becomes very dynamic, right? You can create fields on the fly because it's, it can be modified based on your needs. If you want to create a new table, you can go ahead and create it. So it becomes a very fluid. Searching becomes very fast as well. When it comes to NoSQL, you can do partitioning based on some of the keys that you can define at the field level, and also some multiple primary indexing and secondary indexing can be applied on NoSQL databases as well. So it becomes a very, very powerful when it comes to searches. And NoSQL again becomes very powerful when it comes to fluid dynamic changes to the database entities and the metadata itself. So do look up into NoSQL again. A very very powerful concepts, and we are using NoSQL in one of our projects. We have a lot of data that is being crawled from the website, and the data types and the fields do change dynamically. So we want to make sure that we have a very fluid database that can actually adjust and adopt to it. Hence, we started using the MongoDB, and the searches needs to be very fast as well. So we are using NoSQL, MongoDB, NoSQL, and that allows us quick, fast searches off of that. Then again, we talked about the Elasticsearch in the previous, so this kind of leads into that. So you should also tie that Elasticsearch for some of the caching mechanism, right? Memcache, or we are using Memcache, I believe, that allows you to actually store the data that can be easily retrieved from Elasticsearch. So if you do the combination of this NoSQL and Elasticsearch in front, then you can probably get amazing results. Not to undermine the relational databases, right? So I'm still a big fan of relational databases. We use MySQL, MS SQL quite a bit in some of the projects. So it all depends on the need of your organization, of the project, which database makes sense. So you may want to probably take your time, study the requirements, make sure you understand which database is good for what, and then apply that. Okay. However, the bottom line is that the AWS provides you, different flavors. You can install the database, like I said, on an EC2 instance. You can have a RDS, like for example, MySQL database as an RDS, and then don't worry about the backups and stuff like that, and have a Replica DB. Then you can bring in your own licenses, like MS SQL, Oracle, like we have done, and also you have the flexibility of using NoSQL, like MongoDB, DynamoDB. RDS, what are the biggest advantages when you use the RDS? It allows the replication across the different regions, right? So we covered what are the regions. So if you guys are not familiar with regions, then they're different: the North America region, South America region, the Central region, right? So those are different regions that we can probably show you right after the slide. I can log into the AWS account and I can show you. And again, if you already know, that's great. But we covered that different regions within AWS, and each region has multiple AZs, availability zones, right? So if you're using the RDS, it allows replication across the region. So in case if one region fails, for whatever reason, a disaster happens, the data is already replicated to other region and it can be picked up from the other region, right? A huge disaster recovery solution, right? And that's baked into the AWS architecture. It allows multiple AZ deployment for failover. So if you have a database and again, availability zone you should be familiar with, right? So within a region, you have multiple AZs. So if you don't have control over the AZs, by the way, right? You have the control over the regions. And the reason I say this, you don't have control over AZs, basically, the AZs are kind of hidden from the user perspective, and they have the round robin strategy that is implemented by Amazon. So you can define AZ1 or different AZs, but actually which physical location it's going to, you have no control over it. That's what I mean by not having any control over it. The mapping is hidden by normal users, right? And for obvious security reasons. Anyhow, so with the RDS, you can have a multi-AZ deployment for failover. So in case if one of the excuse me, one of the instance goes down on one of the AZ, you can still fall back to the other AZ. And you don't have to worry about it because it automatically switch over. You can also promote, excuse me. You can promote one instance of a database to pick up as the production. So when you have a database which has a read replica, and we'll talk about that, you can easily promote that node to a production ready node, right? What this does is basically if in case of failure on the production box, you do have a backup strategy where the other instance, which was just a failover or read replica, which was actually constantly updating the data on the read replica side, that can be actually picked up as and promoted to the production. Again, RDS is good for disaster recovery solution. And in case of something bad happened to a region, right? So you do have the RDS. The backups and the images can be actually pre-configured, or you can actually take a snapshot yourself, and this helps us a lot, right? So I'll show you what to do when we go to the AWS console, but you can actually take the snapshot and you can distribute that snapshot to different region, or you can actually erect a separate database using that replica, right? We use that a lot, right? So let's say if you have a QA1 environment where we are using a database, QA database, which is tied with the QA1 environment. Now, all of a sudden, let's say we hired some contractors, right? And this happened just recently. Those contractors, they want to actually work on a separate feature that's not going to be released on, let's say in about 2 weeks, maybe a month or so, and they have to do some R&D. You don't want to touch your QA1 database because that they may probably pollute and adulterate your database that your main QA team is using, which would hamper and prevent your regular releases. So what you do is you basically clone your QA1 database and maybe take a backup and then restore it somewhere else, and then actually give that to your contractors, and they can probably go ahead and start doing your research and R&D and stuff. And once that's ready, then they can actually merge it back. So this whole taking a snapshot and images of your databases easily allows you to actually have a very isolated and segregated environment for your other team members or maybe contractors, right? So again, a big advantage of using the RDS if you can, if you feel necessary, or if you want to use a instance of an AWS EC2 instance and install it, then you have to probably do a lot of things on your own, make a backup regularly, and then store it, and then save it somewhere, and then restore it. Using the RDS, it becomes much easier. So I have logged into my AWS account. I went into RDS, but here, once you log in, guys, then you will see the database section, right? Of course, you have many other options like the compute, the storage, management, governance, security. We covered this as well. But now today we are covering this databases, right? So within databases, you can see there is an RDS. We talked about it, right? And the importance and the use of the RDS. There is the DynamoDB. That's the NoSQL database that we talked about. ElasticCache, right? So I talked about briefly today, but we covered in quite depth in the last session about ElasticCache and how ElasticCache can be very beneficial in expediting and serving the data. I haven't used the Neptune. RedShift is again a very powerful data warehouse tool. We'll cover that a little bit in today's session. So if you have multiple data sources that are coming in, you want to make sure that the data gets into one common place where you can run your reports for your business, right? Amazon RedShift is a database that's built on top of a Postgres by Amazon, and with a lot of feature set and functionalities and performance improvement. What this allows you to actually get the data from different sources, and then you can put on top of it a BI tool, right? For example, you can put QuickSight, right? And if you look here, analytics, somewhere here it is, QuickSight. So this QuickSight is a BI tool that is provided by Amazon. You can put on top of your RedShift, which allows you to extract the data, run your query, create cubes, whatever you want to do, and then run those reports. A very, very powerful BI tool by Amazon. We use this a lot, and I will actually show you an example. Hopefully we'll have some time to do that. And you know what, let me just quickly jump over and see if I can show you that. This is the analytic architecture that I've implemented here at Quick Start, right? So if you see that there might be different sources of the databases right here, right? So these are the application, for example, Google Analytics, Facebook, AdWords, we have Magento running, we have different LMSs, some data from Alexa, right, coming in. So all of the data has, these applications have their own databases, right? So that data, sitting in the different databases, it's hard to actually go in and start, pulling the data and then running those reports from independent databases, right, using queries. So the best approach is, and I'm just oversimplifying for the sake of the time, but the best way to do it is, of course, through the security. I'm going to bypass that discussion. You need to push that data into one single common source, right? And the best way when you're on AWS, the solution would be Datawarehouse RedShift, right? So what we are pushing all of the data from multiple different data sources, right, into one single common place as a single source of truth, and that is my RedShift, right? And that is a data warehouse. So that RedShift data warehouse hosts all of the data from different sources, right? Of course, you have to define your schema and whatnot, and you do have to have some sort of a ETL tool, right? So extract, transform, right, and load the data. We are using Scriptella, but you can use any other tool that are available. It could be, this is a free open source tool that we are using, built in Java. Myself and a couple of my team members are really well versed in Java, so we decided to use this Scriptella. And what this does is basically it does the ETL, the extract, transform and load from different sources and on a frequent basis. And then once the data gets extracted and transformed, it gets loaded into the data warehouse, right? So now the data is sitting in one single source database, and that is the RedShift, right? And again, it is built on top of Postgres. Once you get all the data in here, then what? Then you may want want to probably do some analytics, right? So you may want to probably give an opportunity to the business so they can actually start, dissecting the data in any which way they want. You can have your own BI tool like Yellowfin and stuff like that. But what we have done is actually, since we are already on AWS, RedShift is already on AWS, so we decided to actually utilize QuickSight analytics, right? So that BI tool. So that BI tool is connected to the RedShift data warehouse, and QuickSight, you can just go and then map the data and see all the data points from there. And once you get that data into the QuickSight, then you can go ahead and run your reports. You can also send out the alerts and different text messaging and whatnot from that data warehouse. So that allows you to actually work very seamlessly from different sources of data, which is on the left, right? MySQL, MS SQL, whatever data, or the some API calls from the Google Analytics, Facebook, and whatnot. But then it all gets augmented in one data source, and that is your Redshift database. And then from there, we parse the data out to get the right reports. Okay, hope that makes sense from that architecture perspective, and then the data warehouse, how to use it, and the application of that, and the quick. Now let's, and then of course I talked to you about the QuickSight as well. So let's go to the RDS. So if you want to start a database, you come to the Amazon RDS dashboard, right? So in this dashboard, you will see all of the databases that you are running, that if it's running in the cluster. So this is database instance 3 out of 40, allocated storage, right? DB cluster. So these are the allowed, right? So, and then how many snapshots I have, how many manual I've taken, automated is one, recent events, all the details are provided over here, right? So if I go and click on database instances, for example, this database I just created like maybe a few minutes ago, right? Before this session started, because I wanted to walk you guys through, right? So this was a MariaDB. Now it's available. I created on DB M5 X large, right? Because I just started it with the production database. And there are many things that you can do, right? If I go and click on it, you can see the summary. This is the identifier. So if you want to connect to your API, you would need that information, right? And it is installed on the CA Central 1A, exactly physically where it is, we don't know, but you can tell, okay, it says CA Canada Central 1A. The size, the class of the database, it's a DB M5 X large. You can modify, change up or down. The engine that is running is a MariaDB. There are no sessions, obviously, right? But if you click on these sessions, it would actually give you more details on the connections, top SQLs, and database load. It gives you a lot of relevant information that you really need in order to find out exactly how your database is performing. So if I go back here, then there is the connectivity and security. So this is the database endpoint, and this is the report it's running on. So if you want your database to be connected, let's say, in my case, when I was showing you the architecture of my data warehouse, the Redshift, the data needs to be pulled from it, for example, right? So you want to synchronize it, then you would need this endpoint, right? So this whole URL, and you need to configure it into data warehouse and start pulling the data. So this is the endpoint, or if you want to actually have an externally application that needs to talk to it, then obviously you would need to copy paste this and use this in your API, the SDK, in order to connect the database. Okay, networking. The database, the RDS, you need to specify which virtual private cloud you need to install this database in. So this is by default, I've selected the AWS class, which is the session we are doing. So, but you can have it in a separate VPC. You can have a very secure VPC. So if you remember my other diagram that I showed earlier, you have your private subnet, you have your public subnet. Just make sure that you understand that. Let me bring that slide back again, just as a refresher. There we go. Bring it here.
So if you notice that this is the database, right? So right now, this is sitting inside of this VPC 10.0.0.0/16. So if you want to have a separate VPC, which hosts multiple forms of database, clusters of database, you may want to probably have separate VPC, which is called database VPC, for example. And in that VPC, you can make it more secure by having a private subnet. And in that subnet, you can host your RDS, right? This way you can remove the public subnet and make it more secure. So this is what's happening here. So it's just the default VPC that I have selected. This is the subnet group. I just talked about that, right? And if you want to have some certificates installed on the database, you can do that. Security roles, security group, sorry. So which security group? This is if you were in my last session, we talked about the security groups. So you can allow or disallow certain IP to access your database. So if you want to allow everything to talk to it, then you can have 000.0/0, and that security group can be actually associated with your database. Or if you want to make it much more secure and say, okay, specifically this port is allowed and this IP address is allowed, you can specify a database security group, for example, and specify the IP address in that security group, database security group, and just that security group would be tied with this database, and nothing else would be able to access it. These are the things that you need to know and understand when you want to architect your infrastructure, and also while you're making your infrastructure secure. Replication. So this is the replication database 2, right? So it is actually getting the replicated, right? So let me just go here and look at some of the actions. So you can go ahead and stop this database. You can reboot this database box. You can delete it. You can create a read replica or take a snapshot and restore to a point in time, right? So for example, if you want to create a read replica, right? So that read replica is nothing but a copy or clone of this production database called database 2. The advantage of this creating a read replica is you can have that read replica serve a reporting request, right? So if somebody is asking different information a lot of time, you don't want to hit your production database, right? You would, as a good architecture. What you want to do is actually have a read replica, which is basically aligned with your production database. However, it is having all the data that is actually inserted and modified in your production database, but allow this read replica to serve off of all the reports, right, and queries. It's only read, hence read replica. Cannot modify that because it's not a two-way sync. There are databases which allow master-master, replicas and stuff like that in MySQL, but then you have to configure it yourself. In this read replica, you are just passing the data and allowing it just to read. You can have multiple read replicas. You can also have, based on the region, the availability zone, you can say, okay, well, I'll create this in this region, for example, because my reports requesting users are from a different region, for example, right? So if you have Asia Pac, right, or maybe South Asia, where people are requesting a lot of reports, what you do is basically you set that read replica in that region, and that data is basically synchronized between your production database and read replica. This way, the folks who are requesting the report from, let's say, Asia Pac, for example, they will get a less latency, and they won't be coming and hitting your main production database. I just click on create read replica. When you come here, you will see different options. You're creating a read replica instance from a source database instance. This new database instance will have the source database instance's DB security group and DB parameter group. So everything is inherited. That's what's saying. So you whatever security group, like I said earlier, if you want to have very specific IP address blocked or allowed, certain ports allowed or blocked, then you may want to probably set a specific security group and associated with that and within that VPC. So this is inheriting all of that information from the production database that you're running the read replica from. DB instance class. So if you go here, there are a bunch of databases options, database box options that you have, right? You could have a DB2 T2 micro, right, which is only 1 GB RAM, 1 CPU.
right, all the way to DB M5X, M5.24X large with 96 virtual CPUs and 384 gigabytes. So again, if you're running a very large enterprise applications and need a really heavy box, then you may want to probably consider this, right? But again, price, right? So it's going to be very expensive. Multi-AZ specifies if the database instance should have a standby deployed in another availability zone or not. So within read replica, you can probably have another database which can be actually copied and cloned off your read replica. You can say yes or no, right? So if you do say yes, then it's going to create another copy of that and it's going to start replicating there as well. Storage type, if you guys have attended my last session on the storage, then you would know there are different types of storage: general purpose, SSD, provision, IO ops, and then magnetic, right? So magnetic is very slow. Provision is fairly decent. General is a little bit slow, right? You can leave it as an provision. I think this is 10,000 IO ops, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Yeah. So you can specify how the throughput is it go up or down, right? Storage and IOPS impact instant performance until operation complete. So let's leave that as it is. Network and security, destination region, this region in which the replica will be launched. So you have all the regions. So this is the region we were talking about earlier at the start of the call. You have Africa, Cape Town, EU West, EU Frankfurt, EU North. You know, these different regions. So again, if you are to serve customers, let's say in Asia Pac, right, then you may want to probably select a region closer to that, so that the replica is serving all of the customers' requirements from that region, right? So let me just go back and maybe pick central. Okay, destination DB subnet group, again, private and public subnet. So you can probably default to whatever the security subnet group you want to. Availability zone, where do you want to start this database replica? You have the option of different availability zones, and also of course your regions. Publicly accessible DB instance, EC2 instance will and device outside of the VPC hosting the DB instance will connect the DB instances. You must also select one or more VPC security group that specify which EC2 instance and devices can connect. So again, now if you want to have your database access from outside, you may want to probably select that option, and then you have to make sure that this is also catered in your security group, right? If the security group is tighter, then this is not going to work. So you have to make sure that it's thought about. There's something that you have to consider is your security group and your allowing this publicly accessible kind of matches. And I don't know a good reason of allowing the database to be accessible from outside. If you even want to have people connect to your database, then you may want to probably create a jump box or a maybe tunneling so that they connect through that and then connect to the database. Directly connecting to the database may not be a good option, but again, it depends on your need. No DB instance will not have a public IP address assigned. No EC2 instance or devices outside of VPC will be able to connect. Security group. So again, you can have a default security group or security group that you, if you want to specify with a certain properties, you can select the one that you just created. Encryption. So if you want to encrypt the database, this is the account. Read replica source, this is the source. So I have this just one database running in this region. That's why I have selected DB2, database 2. DB instance identifier, this is the unique key that identifies DB instance. So you can say DB replica -1. Okay, and this is the port. Okay, and enable hints monitoring. So how much time I got? About 10 minutes. Auditing, if you want to allow some auditing, slow query log, it's always a good idea to have that. Maybe general and error logs. Auditing, I think it's maybe too much. Again, it depends on your need. You can allow that. Performance insight, enable performance insight. This is where it's going to keep your insights or data for that many days. So if you want to keep this data for 7 days or a year, 2 years, depending on your need, you can actually specify that. Or you can disable your performance insight. Maintenance auto minor version update specify the DB instance should receive an automatic engine version update. Now, if somebody, right, if this is a MySQL database engine which is running right behind the scene, then If you want to actually receive those updates, then you may want to probably say yes. So automatically AWS will take the responsibility and update. If you don't want that, then you can select no. Now click on create and read replica. So this is gonna go ahead and actually create a read replica. So once that is done, it's gonna go ahead and come back here and show us the read replica done. So for example, right here, it is creating. Okay, so we have created one RedShift environment over here. So you can see there is one cluster that is available. If I click on it, this is the database, right? It has already taken the RedShift. It has taken 19 snapshots since the beginning of this RedShift. This allows you to actually go and start, hosting the data, right? That is coming from different sources. If you want to run the queries, then you can go click on the queries, and then you can start writing the queries over here, right? There's the editor, sorry. So if you want to start connecting to this database, right? So you need to actually go and click on the editor, create new connection. This is the data, the cluster that you want to collect, that you want to actually connect to, the name of this database, the user, and the password. I don't really have that information here, but if you want to actually connect to this data warehouse, then you can, and run the queries on this database, you can go ahead and you can click on the database and provide the information, and then start running the queries off of this. Let me just go here. Clusters, and there you go. So let's look at the some of the properties over here. So query monitoring. This allows you to see the query history, database performances. So you can, if you want to see how well your data warehouse is doing, it gives you a wait, commit, and execution times for the database's workload, concurrency, queued versus running queries. So it gives you a lot of good data that you want to monitor based on your data warehouse. I want to actually go one more place. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so this one does not have it. We created the cluster here. Okay, I think that's the only place we have created a cluster of the data warehouse. Yeah, I think Oregon is the only place where we have created the cluster. I thought we have created multiple clusters, but I think we have created only one cluster here in Oregon. Let me quickly go to QuickSight, which is again the BI tool. Here we go. So if you remember my diagram, right? So we have the data warehouse, which is taking in all the data, and on top of that, we have the business intelligence tool. So this is the BI tool that we are using. Here you can go ahead and, if I go to the dashboard, so you can go ahead and start, pulling in all of the data from your RedShift data warehouse, and you can start, write your data queries and then start, charting it. Different types of graphs are available within this QuickSight tool. It's a very nifty tool, and if you have time, I would highly recommend you should go ahead and start looking into it. This allows you, for example, here, it allows you to create different reports in different visual types. For example, you have pie charts, you have bar graphs, you have Excel spreadsheet exports as well. So all that kind of stuff is actually available here. You give this to your business users, right? So because what you have done, you have actually ported all of the data to the data warehouse, which is connected to your QuickSight, right? Now QuickSight is basically it allows you to give access to your business users who can run the report right here. So again, the data coming from here goes into the data warehouse, and again, you have giving access to your business users to use the BI tool which they run. Now, you may want to probably come up with some canned reports with some specific data. by drag and drop. But the thing is that, you know, not necessarily all of the not all of the reports that you will create for your business users will be actually used or are actually needed by the business users, right? So they will always come up with maybe something that is needed differently. So if you give this tool, they can go ahead and create the report themselves. You don't have to worry about it. For example, let me just is the latest here. Okay, so deleted. Okay, so we have to probably create. Okay, I have to create a spice information, I think. So that's why. Let's quickly jump back and see our database, see if that is available. Okay, so it's still creating it. One thing I'd like to show before we end the session here, if I go into this database and if I look into the actions, even because it's creating right now, it's disabled. But you see this option, which is promote. This is a very interesting option, right? So what it does is basically in case if your main primary database, which is this one, dies, then what you can do, come here, click on read replica and say promote. As soon as you click on this promote, this new replica database becomes your production database, hence, you know, your failover, right? So this allows you to have a 100% availability in case if something bad happens to your production database. The data does not get lost. The replication or the latency between the main production database and the replica is negligible, right? Again, it could be, you know, in case of something bad happens to your main production database, the data that is being transferred to your read replica is instantly available on your read replica. Boom, you can always get your main database taken offline, and then you can actually get your read replica promoted to the one. So that is something I really wanted to show you guys. The other thing is, maybe if you want to take a snapshot, you can click on the database, the actual database, click on take snapshot. So temp snapshot, right? And then of course you would give date, time, stamp, and whatnot. Once you do that, then the temp snapshot will be created. While it's doing it, of course, it's not going to give you details. Once it's done, then it would actually tell you when exactly it got created, right? Once the database is created, you can also restore the snapshot or copy it and share it or delete the snapshot. So if you want to restore your database from this snapshot, you can go here and then actually click on restore snapshot and restore it to this point. If you want to copy this to a different environment, again, so that people, let's say contractors or other Q environment, needs to have access to a Q environment database that you have created in another region or another availability zone, and now you're creating a separate environment, but you want the same database, you can obviously copy this and or restore it to a different region / different AZ and attach it to a different EC2 instance. This concludes, I guess, my today's session. There are quite a few other things within the RDS and databases. Couple key takeaways would be, again, to try to understand the need of your project, your organization. You could be using a database installed on EC2 instance, very, very cheap, but you have to maintain and have the replica yourself. You could have a RDS, which allows you the backups and the stuff that I was showing you right now, or you can also use the NoSQL database, which are also available within AWS. The other key takeaway is basically using your the RedShift for your data warehouse needs, and also QuickSight for your BI tool.